Hi, my name is Frank Wonderly, and today I'm going to give a presentation about technical communication. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the different technical communication dimensions that are incorporated into ASU's Student Pavilion, as well as what roles and decisions pro-tech communicators need to be involved in. And I will also talk about what pro-tech communicators' job would be in creating and designing things for the Student Pavilion. So firstly, we would have to answer a question what the Student Pavilion actually is. So the Student Pavilion is a sustainable and 100% green facility which offers spaces for students to meet and study together. And it was finished in 2017 and became operational the same year. So leading into our first dimension, which is the economic dimension, the Student Pavilion is a multi-use facility which prides itself with its commitment in being as sustainable as possible in terms of its energy usage. So, for example, it's a zero-waste facility, which means that any byproducts of cooling or heating or any other activity are used in one way or another for something else. And it has a practically non-existent carbon footprint, and all its energy is renewable. And the energy is renewable in the sense that there are solar panels and chill beam and indirect evaporative cooling, external window and wall shading, energy efficient offices, etc. So another important thing is that it's operated in a similar fashion to the MU, which means that it offers rooms for events and panels, but also chill out areas for students, and I'll get into more of that later. So the next thing would be also that students can access the building at any time and use its services at zero cost. So the role that technical communicators can play here is that of a consultant for adding new and even more sustainable technology to the building. And if it's not technology, then maybe something environmentally friendly, such as a student-maintained garden, much like in Barrett's sustainability building. These need to be communicated to those handling the cash in a professional and convincing way in order to receive funding. So that's where I see the technical communicators come in. Now moving on to the institutional dimension. Um, Institutional dimensions and factors include undergraduate student government and many other student organizations on campus. And I'll get into what some of those organizations are in just a minute, but some of them include the LGBT groups and international student groups. And it's important to note that any student from any school on campus can access the building and enjoy the services and amenities. And students can also choose to either study, work on their homework or work in group projects, or get help from tutors who work at the facility. So technical communicators could gather information on what students' needs are in respect to all these activities, and they could also help design new features to accommodate the diverse cultures present in the pavilion. So the Memorial Union, for example, has empty prayer and relaxation spaces for students, and professional communicators could develop something similar for the pavilion, but designed a little bit more user-friendly, like prayer mats for Muslims or other student demographics. And this brings me to the next dimension, which is the demographic dimension of the student pavilion. So the student pavilion primarily caters to undergraduate students of ASU, which are typically between the ages of 18 and 22. But it could also be a student that is just generally seeking help for a class, or a club president in need of a conference room to hold meetings in. So the study areas are very large and feature lots of computers with internet access for students to accomplish their homework. The office spaces are designed to create a hub for students to actively engage with the various clubs and organizations that exist on ASU's vast campus. And so it's fair to say that the main focus is on students from 18 to 22, which are essentially undergrads. So professional communicators could expand this demographic by offering computer courses for older generations who would be less inclined to use the pavilion's large stock of computer hardware because they feel intimidated by it. So expanding the demographic would expose students of all ages to new experiences and enhance dialogue between them. And speaking of dialogue, moving into the cultural dimension, uh, the cultural dimension of the Student Pavilion features the offices of many student coalitions, such as the American Indian Council, the Black African Coalition, and the Coalition of International Students, as well as the Chinese Student and Scholars Association. So, all these diverse cultures and groups create a unique vibe with the pavilion that promotes inclusion and multiculturalism. And professional communicators could act as translators and mediators between different groups of people, and thus speed up further cultural exchange, which is vital for any university to thrive. And next up, we have the educational dimension. So, as I mentioned before, the pavilion offers tutoring for all majors of all levels of the game, and they also provide feedback on one's work in class. So, study groups can use computers with internet access and complete any assignment that they may face in a timely manner here. And as I already touched on, the fact that technical communicators could offer computer courses to those older than the pavilion's typical demographic. Another role technical professional communicators could assume is that of a counselor for struggling students, who struggle with their coursework, or maybe even just the stress of university in general or being away from home. So these communicators don't necessarily have to be psychologists, but they could just be staff that have an open ear for students who may not have nobody to turn to listen to their problems and concerns. So they could also just educate students on alternatives to their current major, or just give, helpful advice in general to help them along. Next up, we have the ethical dimension. So this is the last dimension I'm going to talk about, and as I mentioned on my slide about the economic dimension, the student pavilion is really big on sustainability, which is in its essence, it promotes a greener and more environmentally conscious attitude towards its surroundings. So a very important aspect here is that the pavilion fosters unity and multiculturalism through its inclusionary nature of all students of all backgrounds. So the pavilion has no room for racism, gender bias, or religious discrimination, and it proves this by putting all the aforementioned under the same roof. So it is in this dimension that I see the most important role for professional communicators, which is that of a promoter of equal rights and anti-discrimination of other religious communities. One way communicators could achieve this is by fostering dialogue between the different faiths within the pavilion. So the way I see it, like maybe an example is, the communicator could be a faith agnostic, if that's even a thing, preacher who is just there to offer comfort for students and further understanding between them. So in conclusion, I'd like to point out all the relevant dimensions I was able to detect within the student pavilion, which are the economic, institutional, demographic, cultural, educational, and ethical dimension. And I would also say, given that all that was just discussed, that technical and professional communicators can assume a vast array of helpful roles within the student pavilion, and I would also suggest that their importance to the success of the pavilion cannot be understated. So thank you very much for paying attention to my presentation on technical/professional communication and the dimensions within the student pavilion. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Thank you very much.